I've been eating an animal-based diet for more than 5 years. What's my body fat? How much visceral fat? What's my bone density? What do my muscles and fat look like in my body? I'm gonna go get a DEXA scan and put this diet to the test. Let's see what I got.
Nice to meet you, Paul.
Nice to meet you.
So this front page will include the summary for your whole body, which includes your total body fat percentage, your weight taken from the scale built into the machine, and the totals for fat tissue and lean tissue in your body as of today. Now, lean tissue will include everything that is not fat and bones, so it's more than just muscle mass. There's water, tendons, ligaments, organs will go in there. If you had any food or liquids consumed during this morning, then that would go into those totals as well.
It says total body fat is 10.5.
So you're in the normal category where we see a decreased risk of different health conditions.
How many people do you see that have a body fat of 10.5%?
Not many. For most men that I've seen in my personal experience, like this is not science-based information, they tend to vary from maybe 15 to 22. Yeah, and then that's on the people that have shared that they do engage in sports and physical activities. For people that are just starting to become more active, I tend to see a little bit higher percentage, but then again, the body fat percentage itself can vary so much from person to person.
And what about for women?
For women, we tend to be a little bit higher in percentages just because we have different necessities when it comes to hormonal differences.
It's interesting because if I were 11.5% more fat, I wouldn't think that wouldn't be a normal body fat to me, but I guess, 18 to 49 years old, I'm 46 years old, less than 24.5. Yeah. The ranges seem a little bit lax to me, but.
Well, we're not addressing athleticism or aesthetics or a specific preference for body fat percentage. We're just addressing the risks we've seen increase based on this number.
Okay.
Now, second page, we have your visceral fat scan. Since this is the type of fat tissue that's being stored around your organs, and through research, we've seen a closer relationship to increasing the risk for heart disease, stroke, diabetes, hypertension, amongst other conditions, we want to keep track of this one the most. So it's pretty hard to give you a number to aim for. What we look into is the tendency throughout time to see if you've increased drastically in a short period of time, which would change the conditions at which your organs are working, or if you're decreasing or maintaining.
Okay, so visceral fat, 0.3 pounds.
It's on the lower end of what I tend to see in DEXA scans, yeah.
Okay. Does the visceral fat give you any indication of the amount of fat in your liver?
This technology will not tell you specifically around which organ it's being stored. So it's just in general below the abdominal wall what's being stored there. So right now, this is the amount in pounds that it's being stored around your organs, which if you want a point of reference, it's on the lower end of what I tend to see. But then again, that's not science-based information. It's possible to get a 0. And I've seen all the way up to 7 pounds. So.
7 pounds. Okay. And what is this AG ratio?
The AG ratio is the comparison of region fat percentage between your android region and the gynoid region. The android region is from below the rib cage to that lower end of the trunk, so that line that you see right on top of your pelvis. And the gynoid is going to be this triangle right here that incorporates part of your hips, glutes, and thighs. We include this as a secondary measurement to understand fat distribution in your body and have a rough idea of what type of risk do we see based on that distribution. Doctors used to take the circumference measurements around your waist and your hips and get a ratio from that. This is a modern version of that, where we're comparing the percentages that you see on the following page here, which is 6 and 13.2 from those regions for you. And then that's where we get that AG ratio, which optimally we want to aim for anything lower, below 1.0. But then again, genetically, where we store fat and where we burn it, it's going to vary a lot. So that's why it's a secondary measurement and not necessarily something that we pay attention to as we do for the actual amount of visceral fat in pounds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so less than 1 is optimal and I'm 0.46. Okay.
The trunk is going to be limited from below the chin to the top part of your pelvis, just like we saw on the previous page. The android region is part of the trunk from below the rib cage to that same lower end of the pelvis. And then the gynoid is the triangle that incorporates part of hips, glutes, and thighs. So you can keep track of exactly how much fat tissue and lean tissue it's being stored in each one of those regions.
Okay.
Now, following page, we start to look into your extremities as well, where we have both of your arms in the top table and then the comparison between your right and left side at the bottom, where we can address the amount of lean tissue stored in each side so that we can try to see if there's a noticeable difference where we may see a muscle imbalance and therefore an increased risk of a postural problem. But right now, with a 1 pound difference from lean tissue from your right side to your left side, that's still within what we tend to see.
It's interesting. So there's a difference of 1 pound of muscle between my right arm and my left arm. So I'm right-handed. That's just coming from doing things with my right arm more.
Could be, yes.
Interesting. So I need to do more things with my left hand.
What I tend to do is my single arm exercises, I'll start them out with my least dominant side and then try to push that one close to failure and then just do the same amount of reps and sets with my right side. Because if I tend to start with the right, by the last few reps on my set for my left side, then I'm already struggling and losing technique.
Right.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily stimulating the right section.
Okay.
Same approach on the following page, but now for your legs, where we have both of them in the top and then the comparison between your right and left side at the bottom.
It's interesting because it's the same. My right leg has
Yeah.
1 pound more than my left leg. So my right leg,
You're definitely right dominant.
yeah, right dominant. Interesting. But it's funny because I'm a surfer.
Okay.
So I do a lot, but I'm a goofy-footed surfer. So my left leg is getting a lot of pressure on my left side, but it still has 1 pound less muscle. So I'm right dominant.
Yeah.
So I need to just do a lot of things with my whole left side of my body.
Maybe, yes. And then following page, we start to look into bone mineral density. So here we have two scores. We have your T-score and the Z-score. The T-score is the one that we use to screen if there's a possibility of suffering from osteopenia and osteoporosis, where we're comparing the analysis of your full skeleton from your skull to your toes and comparing it to a healthy 30-year-old. So that way we can see if there's a noticeable loss of bone tissue where we see a potential risk for those conditions. But with your score, you're in the positive side of that graph, which would place you clearly above -1 and therefore in the normal category.
For bone density.
Yes. Now, for the Z-score, that one at the bottom, that's going to compare you to a healthy individual of your same age and gender to see if there's if you're within what's average, above that, or below that. 0.0 is what would be normal. You're slightly above that with an extra 2 decimals there, which would place you between these two scores and therefore between these two percentages as well.
So right in the middle in terms of bone density. Who do you tend to see with low bone density?
For my personal experience, it's mostly endurance athletes. On the other end, powerlifters tend to be like super high scores.
High density. Why do you think an endurance athlete would have lower score?
I don't know necessarily how to answer that.
Over exercising?
Could be. I don't really have like the scientific information to share that with you, but it would make sense that engaging in strength training, which is what powerlifters do, see a higher increased bone mineral density because of that exposure to tension and different vectors of force.
Yeah, cool. All right, thank you.
Yes.
What about vegans and vegetarians? How do they score in terms of bone density?
I wouldn't be able to tell you because not everyone discuss their personal preference for nutritional habits.
And there's a good amount of research showing that vegans and vegetarians have low bone density compared to the general population. So I bet if people actually disclose that, you would see that vegans and vegetarians tend to have weak bones, especially vegans.
Following page, we have your resting metabolic rate, which is estimated with the Harris-Benedict equation. So we're assuming that your metabolism works at an average rate, but it could be faster or slower. So just know that there could be some variance. For most people, it can go up to 200 calories plus or minus. But this is what's estimated for you to burn at rest if you were just to lay down for 24 hours without any physical activities. Therefore, we're including a chart to give you a rough idea of how much you're actually burning per day, assuming that you're not just laying down for 24 hours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it says here 1,660 calories is your resting metabolic rate. That's how much I would burn, according to this, based on and this is based on lean muscle mass.
This is based on your height, weight, gender, and age. So it doesn't take in consideration your body fat percentage.
Interesting. That seems like an oversight in the Harris-Benedict equation, but it's saying 1,660, that's how many calories I would burn if I'm just laying down.
Yes.
Now it says here there's estimated energy requirements based on activity levels. I've got 1,660 times 1.95 if I do 120 minutes of vigorous exercise a day.
Greater than or equal, yes, to that amount.
What would you consider vigorous exercise?
In a 1 to 10 rate of perceived exertion, probably like a 9 or a 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why most people would fall more into the moderate activity.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I do the calculation, so 1,660 times 1.95 is 3,200 calories. When I do my chronometer, I'm usually eating probably 3,200 to 3,500 calories a day. So my baseline resting metabolic rate must be much higher than this.
Could be the case, yes.
And I surf about 2 hours a day. I wouldn't consider it vigorous activity. It's more like, I would say, moderate activity. I mean, what would you say moderate on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say like a 7 to an 8.
Yeah, but it's funny because like surfing is not a 7 to an 8 unless I'm paddling.
Yeah, and you do get some breaks between waves.
Yeah. It's interesting, greater than 60, somewhere in there. Yeah. So I think that my resting metabolic rate must be higher.
Could be the case, yes.
Yeah. Do you find that this calculation is fairly accurate for people, or do people generally find that it's under?
It varies so much, it's kind of hard to tell you. We do have resting metabolic rate within our services, and some people tend to be slightly different than what's estimated to be average, but maybe between 10 and 20% difference from what's average.
High or low?
Both ways.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that would be the best way if you want to really track the calories that you're consuming, would be to do an RMR test rather than just an equation, because like I said, we're assuming a lot with an equation rather than actually measuring.
Yeah, I generally don't find that these are that useful. I kind of just, like, I maintain my weight, and then I just eat to hunger based with like good quality foods. Yeah. And then there's macronutrient breakdown here.
Yeah, so that's based on the Institute of Medicine to stay within those ranges. It's not necessarily for you to follow those. Some people like to challenge those with maybe keto diets, are a little bit more into like high fat, high protein. But overall, that's what's advised to stay within.
Yeah, I'm not into keto diets at all. I probably do 300 plus grams of carbohydrates a day, 180 grams of fat, and probably, off the top of my head, maybe about 180 grams of protein. And like I said, when I do chronometer, I get over 3,000 to 3,500 calories a day. Okay. Do you ever talk to people, I guess, would your dietitians talk to people about the differences between the quality of protein between animal foods and plant foods?
I'm not necessarily sure if they discuss that subject.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
In summary, 10.5% body fat. That's about what I expected. I'm pretty lean. I'm not dieting. I eat 3 meals a day. I eat 3,500 calories a day. I don't fast. I don't do intermittent fasting. And for my activity, I do surf a couple hours a day. So what's interesting for me about this DEXA is that my visceral fat is very low, 0.3 pounds. Many people will say eating honey, eating fruit, eating fructose, that causes liver fat. Well, I've essentially got a very, very low amount of visceral fat. I don't have any significant amount of fat in my android region, as you guys heard in that video. In my viscera, there's a very, very small amount of fat around my organs. Anyone arguing that I have fatty liver or fatty organs, or that eating fruit and honey is gonna cause visceral fat, I mean, that's pretty much the proof for you right there. Like, there's really nothing significant there. I think that this is just another piece of evidence that eating fruit, eating honey will not cause you to gain weight, will not cause you to gain visceral fat, will not cause you to get fat around your liver at all. So a DEXA scan is kind of interesting because it means for me in my training that I should focus on the left side a little more, meaning maybe I should start my sets on the left side, make sure I'm doing a good amount of work with my left side to try and balance these out. And with my surfing to try and understand how I'm using this in all the things that I'm doing every day. The last piece of this that I thought was interesting was my bone density. Now, I've never had a DEXA scan in the past, but my bone density is just normal. If I wanted to increase my bone density, I could incorporate a little more weight-bearing exercise into my exercise routine, which I probably will do because I would like to have a little bit higher bone density. I think this bone density is normal, and it shows that I'm not vegan or vegetarian, osteopenic, frail bones. And I tend to think I have pretty strong bones based on the beatings I get in the ocean and on the skate ramp. But I think that with this bone density, I could probably focus a little bit more on weight-bearing stuff when I'm not in the ocean surfing. In terms of the basal metabolic rate, it's clearly underestimating my BMR. I'm eating 3,500 calories a day, not gaining weight, maintaining 10.5% body fat. So maybe if you get a DEXA, it gives you a sense of where you want to be with your calories. I don't really believe counting calories is that valuable in the first place. I kind of just focus on eating meat, eating organs, eating high quality foods, along with fruit and honey, based on the amount of carbohydrates that I want when I'm doing certain amounts of exercise. And then I just go to satiety. And that's how I do it. I don't really think about calories. I eat enough to perform well, to sleep well, to feel good, to recover. I don't really limit carbohydrates much at all. If I want fruit, if I want honey, I eat it. That's the DEXA scan. I don't know, 5.5 years on an animal-based diet. I'd say it looks pretty good.